Hi class. We're going to go over, crud, what chapter is this? Sorry, chapter 11. And it's the heart chapter and blood vessel chapter. Last week we were looking at blood and some of the ins and outs of blood chemistry, and now we're going to look at a lot of new anatomy in this chapter. So that's one of the first things to grasp is the anatomy. And I'm not sure exactly where you are in lab. In an ideal world, you would be learning the same thing in lab and lecture, but it doesn't work out like that. And even in face-to-face classes, when I teach both the lecture and the lab, they get off kilter as well. So this gives you an opportunity to work ahead in lab if you haven't yet got there in lab, and that way when you get to the heart section in lab, you'll be nice and prepared and you already know some of the stuff. Going through this chapter, there are some, I don't want to say tricky, but some more complex things. This is not an easy chapter. A lot of students struggle with it because it is a very abstract idea, this idea of blood flowing through our bodies and how it gets from one place to another, and this system, that blood is always in every part of the system during the entire time. So it's not going from one to the other and then the last spot is now empty, it's just being filled with new blood. So that's a complex thought to get in your head, and one of the ways you can tackle that is by looking at the diagram on page 310. It's the first page of the chapter. Taking your good old finger there and just tracing it through the pathway. See if you can map it out. See if you can say it as you map it out. Where is this blood going? It's going to the system. Now it's going back to the heart. Now it's going to the lungs. Now it's coming back to the heart. Just so you understand that there is this ebb and flow of blood all over your body, and there are two major, or really three major places that it stops along the way for exchange of chemicals. So that's first. Second, you need to understand where the heart is and all of the different parts of the heart. The heart valves, the heart cells, the cardiocytes, what they are, how they're made, those special connections, intercalated discs that make them up. Very important to understand how that works, because that's going to help you understand how the heart contracts, which is coming up in the next couple of pages. So the diagram that's on page 313 is showing you the basic anatomy of the heart. This is, again, what you will be covering in lab, but this is a sneak peek of some of the superficial anatomy for you here in lecture. The picture that's on page 314 is a really awesome diagram because it goes through the exact same thing I was just explaining, the flow of blood through the heart. It's important to understand that there's a system to it. It starts on one side and then it goes out to the lungs, and then it comes back to the other side, and then it goes out to the body, and so on and so forth, and which valves are where and how they open and close, and that whole idea. Very important to understand, and that's all for you right there on page 314. Take your good old note cards, put one step on each note card, see if you can put them in order. Great way to learn that concept. Then we get into the heart's electrical activity. It starts at the top of the heart and then trickles down to the bottom of the heart. That's pretty much the gist of the electrical activity. It starts at the SA node, and again, you can take note cards and put them in order. You can diagram this out as a flow chart, and that would be a good way to understand the electrical activity. The EKG or ECG waves are important to understand which waves they are, what they correspond to on the heart. It is not the physical heartbeat, it's not the contraction, it's the electrical stimulation that's occurring in the heart that's measured on the EKG. So that's there for you on page 315. The other thing that is super important is all of the dots need to be connected now. So you need to understand how that EKG stuff and that electrical stuff fits together with the blood flow stuff and the contraction stuff. And that is all diagrammed out on what we call the cardiac cycle, and that diagram is on page 317. So it's showing you not just what's going on in the heart in terms of volume, it's also showing you the pressure, and it's showing you the actual contraction that's happening with the muscles squeezing and pushing the blood out of the heart. So that's a really, really important concept to understand. It's the most important concept in this chapter, is that cardiac cycle that's right there for you on page 317. Then we move into how cardiac output is regulated. It's regulated through changing your heart beat or your heart rate, as well as the actual amount of blood we call stroke volume, the actual amount of blood that's coming out of the heart. So those two things, and all of the other factors that influence those, if you're exercising, if you're sedentary, etc., all of that is diagrammed for you on page 318. Then we get into blood vessels, the second section of this chapter. Comparing arteries to veins is the first major topic, and looking at how the blood flows from the heart through the big arteries, through the smaller arteries, and smaller arteries to the arterioles, to the capillaries. It's the system that's involved. And the diagram there on page 320 does a nice job showing you where everything is and how it's connected together. The next couple pages diagram out and describe all of the names, the specific names of the blood vessels in your body. Do you have to know them all? Well, if you've been paying attention all along, they really shouldn't be hard. The radial artery, guess what? That's next to the radius bone, which is in your arm, right, in the radial region of your arm. So the humeral artery, the femoral artery, they're all named after the regions of the body or the bones that they're next to. So yes, you have to know them, but that should be very, very straightforward. You shouldn't be spending hours and hours memorizing blood vessels because they're all, again, named after things that we know already. At least you should know them if you've been paying attention. Next we get into capillaries and capillary exchange, pretty complex process. All of the stuff getting pushed out on the arterial side and then reabsorbed on the venous side. That's how tissue exchange takes place. That's how all of our tissue cells get the oxygen and glucose and sodium and all that stuff that they need. Looking at how blood moves through the veins is the next section, and there's a cute little picture of the squeezing of those veins as the blood gets squeezed back up through the legs. Even though gravity wants to push the blood down, those little valves just keep it pushing up. Then you have all of the different veins in your body. Same deal with the arteries. They're named after where they are, and usually the veins and arteries are paired. So you have a radial artery, then you have a radial vein. You'll have a femoral artery, you'll have a femoral vein. Pretty much the same thing. A few variants there, but most of them are the same. Then we get into some special circulatory systems, like the pulmonary circuit, which we pretty much covered already in just the general circulation already. There's also the hepatic portal system, which is the special circulation system going from the digestive tract. Those are very important to understand and very important in understanding how the whole body works instead of just understanding one system compared to another system compared to another system. It's kind of putting the pieces together. Just like this last section on blood pressure. It's important to understand how all of these other things that are going on in your body affect your blood pressure and why it's important to maintain your blood pressure. Again, that's all there on page 332, 333, and regulation of blood pressure is diagrammed out for you in 334. That's pretty much it. There's some mechanisms in maintaining blood pressure on page 336, how different parts of your body play a role, but otherwise that's pretty much this chapter. It's a complex chapter. I don't want to tell you it's easy and straightforward, because it's not. It's a lot, so don't waste time getting into it. Dig in tonight if you haven't already, and let me know if you have any questions. See ya.